Greetings. Father Mark signing on, continuing with the series on the early modern papacy, picking up where we left off last time. Pope Leo X died at the end of the year. He died on December 1st, 1521. So the conclave, since Christmas, anyway, the conclave went into the next year, into 1522. It was the conclave of 1522 was particularly contentious, not because of the Protestant movement, which they assumed would eventually be crushed, as had been the Hussite movement of earlier in the 14th century, but it was contentious because of the perennial rifts of family interest and national allegiance that Satan had so often used against the church to devastating effect. The situation appeared insoluble, so the conclave voted once again. They couldn't decide. The cardinals, they couldn't decide among themselves who to vote because they all hated each other's guts. So they voted for a cardinal who was not present in the conclave. He couldn't make it in time. He was Dutch. His name was Adrian Dedal, D-E-D-A-L. He was the last non-Italian pope until John Paul II was elected in 1978. He reigned for nearly 2 years as the 218th pope under the Latin form of his baptismal name. So he was baptized Adrian. So this is Pope Hadrian VI. Baptized, as I said, Adrian Dedal. He was born in Utrecht on March 2nd, 1459. Diocese with a very long history, which we covered in the medieval course. He was born into what we would call today a blue-collar family, a working-class family. His father was a carpenter. His mother was very, very pious. She had connections to the Northern European movement of lay spirituality that opened the possibility of higher education for her son. He attended the University of Louvain in Belgium, where he performed, present-day Belgium. At the time, it was all part of the Netherlands. He was a brilliant student. After graduation, he served as a professor, then rector of the school, then chancellor of the school. His reputation earned him the position of tutor to the young prince who would become the emperor, Holy Roman Emperor Charles V. And we've covered this guy several times, and we'll continue to meet him because he inherited so much. He ends up in the stories of multiple nations because on his mother's side, his mother was a Spanish Princess Juana of the House of Trastamara. Through her, Charles was the grandson of Ferdinand and Isabel, making him King of Spain, Naples, Sicily, and all the Spanish possessions in the New World. On his father's side, his father was Philip von Habsburg. Who was the son of the Holy Roman Emperor Maximilian I. So on his father's side, he was the grandson of the Emperor Maximilian I, which made him the ruler of all the Habsburg lands, which was Austria and at the time the Netherlands. And at the time the Netherlands included what is now the Netherlands, Holland, as well as Belgium. And that made him eligible or, virtually guaranteed to be elected Holy Roman Emperor, which he was in 1519. Now, Charles V was a decent human being, but he lived in bad times. He was very pious himself, very devout Catholic. His personal talents were very limited. but he was very dedicated, very hard worker, and he dedicated himself completely to the fulfillment of his duties. His relationship with the papacy during the Protestant movement would at times be very stormy, as we'll see, and he made many mistakes, again, as we'll see. But there was never any doubt that his intentions were good, in the sense that he loved the faith. At times, as we're going to, he would get into altercations with popes. The city of Rome was sacked by his own troops, which is a very complicated story that we'll cover. Anyway, he allowed himself to get distracted. I'll put it that way. He was distracted by dynastic concerns and personality conflicts, and imperialism, nascent imperialism. So he did not focus his effort, the way that the situation called for. Now, of course, to give him his due, as would give all of them their due, they couldn't have known at the time what the Protestant movement would end up becoming, as they had been previous movements, such as it was recovered in the medieval course, the Albigensians, the Cathar movement, the Valdensians, the Hussites, and they came and went. They all went away eventually. So they didn't know, they couldn't have known in their context that the Protestant movement would not go away, and that the results would be, I can't say till the end of time, permanent, but it's been 500 years, and the rifts that opened during the Protestant movement are still with us. If Pope Hadrian VI had lived longer, it's possible that he and Charles might have come up with a plan to mitigate what was happening with the Protestant movement, because they did have a good relationship, as Pope Hadrian had been Charles's tutor. So Charles trusted Hadrian in a way that he would not trust any of the rest of the popes that he would deal with for the rest of his life. Pope Hadrian also understood that some of the criticisms made by the Protestants had some validity, as we've seen, the feudalism problem and the Renaissance problem, and all that went with it. Which I won't repeat all that because we've been covering that since the medieval course. And so he took an initiative to begin the process of reversing that damage, and he began at the top with the Curia and the College of Cardinals. So, and he wrote, as a gesture of good faith, he wrote a letter to the imperial diet that met in Nuremberg in December of 1522. Now, I forget what I've talked about with what class, so I know that to call a meeting a diet doesn't sound right in English, but it's from the Latin word for day. So in German usage, in the Holy Roman Empire, a diet was a meeting that was called for the lords, secular and ecclesiastic, to meet on a particular day. Now, the meeting might go on for weeks, but it would be called the diet of whatever city they met in, followed by the date. So this was the Diet of Nuremberg that met in December of 1522. Pope Hadrian wrote a letter to them, which was read into the record, in which he frankly admitted that much of the blame for the disorder in the church lay with church leadership, because of the feudalism problem and the Renaissance problem. His strategy for coping with the Lutheran movement and the Zwingli movement was to kind of meet them halfway, but not in terms of doctrine. Like he wouldn't have changed any church teaching, in terms of our sacramental theology, but meet him halfway in the sense of addressing the corruption, like the lies about indulgences, for example. And that ultimately is what the Council of Trent did. But their work was not completed for another 40 years. And maybe if if Hadrian could have done it in the 1520s, like that letter was 1522. That's only 5 years after Luther nailed up the 95 Theses. Now, by that point, Luther was excommunicated, so maybe it was already too late. But maybe if all the reforms of Trent had been made that early, things could have been different. But we'll never know, because Pope Hadrian VI died 20 months after his election on September 14th, 1523. So we'll stop there. I'm gonna try something new, because I've gotten some emails from seminarians that when I put out a video that's like 2 or 3 hours and cover multiple popes, they find it hard to to go back if they want to listen to one pope. Then they like, there's no way, I don't have a time index in the video, and I don't know how to do that. So I'm gonna, even though this will be a short video, I'll stop here and then do another video on the next pope, Pope 219, which will be much longer because his reign was longer. So anyway, for now, we will pause with the death of Pope Hadrian VI on September 14th, 1523. Thank you for your attention. Well, the session's not adjourned, but at least this particular segment of the presentation is adjourned.